Eric Steltzer was a towering figure both literally and figuratively. At 6 feet 8 and nearly 300 pounds of muscle, he embodied the extreme fitness lifestyle. His YouTube channel was filled with weightlifting routines, with body transformation videos, and kind of aggressive motivational speeches about pushing the human body to its limits. For his audience, he was an inspiration, someone who had seemingly mastered discipline and self-control. But for those who knew him personally, the cracks had started to show. Behind the camera, his world was falling apart. His obsession with fitness had intensified, but it had now turned into something more concerning, something darker. Friends noticed his behavior becoming erratic. He started to talk about people watching him, and he insisted that he was being followed. Paranoia wrapped itself around his daily routine, and soon it became impossible to ignore. Still, to his growing online fanbase, none of this was visible. They didn't have a clue. His videos instead painted him as a picture of a man at his peak, someone powerful, confident, and in control. The real Eric Steltzer, however, was beginning to spiral. And as his mind unraveled, a nightmare was about to unfold, and everything would end in disaster. By the way, this is Dark Case, and my name is Jack. You know me by now. I think too much, and mainly about bad stuff, which is probably how I ended up here. So that pretty much makes sense. I feel like I kind of just figured that out in real time. And I think most of us in a Dark Case family are probably pretty similar too. And if you want to be part of this happy but weird family, then just double check that you're subscribed and make sure that all of your notifications are on for this channel. If you didn't know, I bring you true crime, unsolved and solved cases, dark stuff, and other things that you may later regret knowing. So make sure you hit like, drop a couple of comments down below, one telling me your favourite breakfast in the world, and a second with your thoughts on this video, as I know it's a little different to normal. And now, on with the video. The signs were there, but no one knew how quickly things would escalate. Eric's family had seen the shifts in his personality firsthand, his paranoia deepening, his delusions intensifying. He now spoke about shadowy figures watching over him. He was convinced that unseen forces were conspiring against him. His erratic behavior went beyond mere anxiety. It was the unraveling of a man who no longer trusted reality. On Christmas Day, his family finally made the call. EMTs arrived, assessing Eric for a psychotic episode. But instead of taking him in, they determined that he was lucid enough to know his own name and the date. So this wasn't enough to warrant a hospitalization. He was left at home, his mind racing, spiraling deeper into delusion. The next day though, his family took matters into their own hands. They hired a team to intervene, to bring him to an inpatient facility where he could finally receive the help that he so desperately needed. However, they would never get the chance. 2 days after Christmas, the situation exploded. Eric had matched with a woman on Tinder. She was 24-year-old Megan Tapley. What started as a date would soon turn into a scene of unimaginable violence. And by the time police arrived at his home that night, Eric Steltzer was an immediate danger to himself and to everyone around him. Megan had no idea what she was walking into. She had met Steltzer through Tinder. It was a casual connection that had taken a sudden, horrifying turn. When she arrived at his home on December the 27th, the atmosphere quickly turned. Something was wrong, and then the melee began. Neighbours would later report hearing screams and sounds of a struggle. Inside the house, Eric, for some reason, had turned on Megan, and he had done so with unimaginable brutality. He attacked her with a sharp implement, plunging at her face, her body, her hands, all as she tried desperately to fight him off. He tore out chunks of her hair, and red splattered the walls. Amazingly, at some point, Megan managed to break free, and she ran for her life as the assault continued. When police arrived at the scene at around 10 p.m, they walked into a nightmare. They saw a woman barely clinging to consciousness. Her face was in a bad way. She was later told that she may lose an eye. Eric was still there, and he wasn't calming down. He was still armed and still attacking. Officers made a split-second decision, and they drew their tasers, aimed, and fired. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. The taser struck and Eric went rigid. His body convulsed as thousands of volts coursed through him. But even as he staggered, he didn't immediately collapse. Officers then hit him again, and then again. 4 times in total they deployed the non-lethal weapon, meant to merely incapacitate him. And it did work, but it worked far too well. As soon as the struggle ended, EMTs moved in, securing him for transport. But en route to the hospital, Eric Steltzer's breathing slowed. And then it stopped altogether. Within minutes, the fitness influencer, the man who had built his brand around strength and endurance, around control, was gone. His father was the first to cry foul. He accused the police of excessive force, insisting that his son was in a mental health crisis, not a criminal act. "He was my life," his father later wrote in a social media post. "This is not over." But for Megan Tapley, the woman that Eric had attacked, there was no question of his innocence. She had barely survived. Her body was scarred, her vision forever altered. She knew that her attacker would never face justice in a courtroom. He would have no trial, there would be no sentencing, but perhaps he had already faced the ultimate justice. The investigation into Eric's death would linger. Medical reports would confirm that the tasers were a contributing factor, but they weren't the only cause. And for the people left behind, the questions would never fully go away. In this instance, due to the nature of his crimes, Eric Steltzer's channel was removed from YouTube. Mona Lisa Perez and Pedro Ruiz III weren't just a couple, they were partners in ambition. The 19-year-old mother and her 22-year-old boyfriend had a dream. That dream was to become famous YouTubers. They envisioned a future where their channel would blow up, gaining millions and millions of subscribers. The couple living in Houston, Minnesota, started their YouTube journey in early 2017. Their videos were a mix of pranks, challenges, and family vlogs, the kind of light-hearted content that had turned countless internet personalities into celebrities. They documented everything, their lives as teen parents, some playful stunts, and their plans for the future. They were young, in love, and determined to make it big. Pedro in particular was obsessed with the idea of viral success. He would brainstorm ideas for wild stunts, ways to push boundaries and to stand out in an oversaturated platform. Mona Lisa played along, but there were moments where she seemed a little hesitant. She was supportive, but some ideas pushed her comfort zone. But if they really wanted it that badly, they believed that the more extreme their content got, the faster their channel would grow. Their content was mostly harmless at first. Mona Lisa would prank Pedro with baby powder on donuts, and they filmed playful, ridiculous challenges. They laughed together, celebrated milestones, and they shared their everyday lives. But underneath this fun was an undeniable pressure to keep upping the ante. Then came June the 26th, 2017, the day that everything changed, and they pushed it way too far. Pedro wanted to do something bold, something that would skyrocket their views, and that would put them on the front page of YouTube. He'd seen other people pull off dangerous stunts online, and he was convinced that they could do the same. The idea, he would hold a hardcover encyclopedia against his chest, while Mona Lisa shot a gun at it. The thick pages he believed would stop the bullet, but Mona Lisa had her doubts. She was hesitant, but Pedro just reassured her. He had actually tested it out before with a different book, and the bullet indeed hadn't gone through. He was certain that this would work. He begged his partner to do it, telling her it was safe, telling her this was their golden ticket to viral fame. What really makes everything about this story even worse is that Mona Lisa is 7 months pregnant at the time that the couple shot this video. Hours before the stunt, Mona Lisa even tweeted about it, writing, "Me and Pedro are probably going to shoot one of the most dangerous videos ever. His idea, not mine." It was clear that she had reservations, but she also trusted Pedro. She wanted to support his dream, and so she agreed. That evening, in front of 2 cameras and a group of nearly 30 onlookers, Mona Lisa stood 1 foot away from Pedro. She raised the .50 caliber Desert Eagle, and then she pulled the trigger. Pedro collapsed instantly. He wasn't moving. The moment the bullet struck Pedro, reality set in. Mona Lisa screamed, dropping the firearm. Panic quickly spread through the gathered crowd. Some people rushed forward, others froze, but everyone was horrified by what they had just witnessed. The cameras at this time were still rolling. Everything was captured. Mona Lisa grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Her voice was frantic, barely coherent. "We were doing a YouTube video and it went wrong," she sobbed. "It's all on recording." Emergency responders arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. The projectile had gone straight through the book and straight through Pedro's chest. In almost an instant, he was gone. And all of this for a stunt that was supposed to secure their future. Law enforcement took Mona Lisa into custody immediately. As officers questioned her, she kept repeating the same thing. "It was his idea. He wanted to do it. I didn't want to." News of Pedro's passing spread rapidly. It was the story of a YouTube stunt gone horribly wrong, and it made national headlines. Viewers rushed to their channel looking for clues, watching their previous videos, seeing the excitement in their eyes just hours before tragedy struck. Pedro's family was obviously devastated. He loved his family more than anything, his aunt said. They were in love. They wanted to do this together. It wasn't supposed to end like this. The law, however, didn't really care about intentions. Someone had died, and Mona Lisa Perez was the one who had pulled the trigger. The legal system moved swiftly. Mona Lisa was charged with second-degree manslaughter, a charge that carried a maximum prison sentence of 10 years. She faced the very real chance of losing everything: her children, her freedom, and the life that she had built with Pedro. Her defense team argued that Pedro had planned the entire stunt, that it was his idea, and that Mona Lisa had been pressured into going through with it. They played the video evidence showing that Pedro had been excited, confident, and insistent that the book would protect him.
A transcript of the audio reveals her hesitation. "Babe, I'm not doing this. I can't. If I kill you, what's going to happen to my life? Like, no, this isn't okay. As long as you hit the book, you'll be fine," Ruiz says. These pictures show she did.
It was reckless, they admitted, but this wasn't intentional murder. Ultimately, the court agreed to a plea deal. Mona Lisa was sentenced to just 6 months in jail, and she would serve it in 10-day increments over the course of 6 months. She would then remain on probation for 10 years and was banned from ever owning a firearm. Honestly, fair enough. The court also ruled that she could not profit from Pedro's passing. This meant no book deals, no movie rights, and no monetized videos. Pedro's family had mixed emotions about the verdict. Some believed that Mona Lisa had suffered enough, and that she should be left alone, allowed to raise her children. Others felt the sentence was far too lenient, given that a man had passed from her actions. Their story really is a cautionary tale, a stark warning about the price of viral fame, and the dangerous lengths that people will go through to chase it. In the early days of YouTube gaming, before it became the massive industry that it is today, one creator stood out for his infectious energy, his humor, and his undeniable skill. His name was Yoteslaya. Born Brian Joseph Rickard on December 17th, 1982, he wasn't a household name outside of the gaming world, but within certain communities, he was truly a legend. Brian uploaded his first YouTube video in September of 2010. It was a simple gameplay clip from Battlefield Bad Company 2. At the time, YouTube gaming was still in its infancy, but Brian had charisma, skill, and a natural ability to entertain. He then quickly transitioned to Call of Duty Zombies, a game that required strategy, precision, and teamwork. One that I tried to play but absolutely sucked at. His guides, challenges, and collaborations with other YouTubers helped to grow his audience, but it was Borderlands that truly cemented his status. By 2012, his channel exploded in popularity as he became known for finding hidden Easter eggs, for mastering gameplay mechanics, and for creating in-depth tutorials for Borderlands 2. His fans flocked to his videos, not just for his gaming knowledge, but for his laid-back and relatable personality. He wasn't just a nameless creator, he was someone who truly loved gaming and made it fun for everyone involved. With hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and with millions of views, Brian was pretty much living the dream. He had turned a hobby into a full-time career. By this time, he was a community leader, a friend to his fans, and an inspiration to others who wanted to make it into the world of gaming content creation. But beyond the screen, Brian also had a life outside of YouTube. One that made his story even more compelling, but ultimately even more tragic. Brian never lost sight of what mattered even more than all of that, and that is his family. He was a devoted father to his two sons, Matthew and Dawson, and he often spoke about them in his videos. In an era where many YouTubers kept their personal lives separate from their content, Brian let his audience in to see his life beyond the screen. So on the surface, he was a gamer, a YouTuber, but underneath it all, he was a father. Outside of YouTube, Brian was also an avid outdoorsman. Hunting, fishing and sports were a huge part of his life, and he often balanced his gaming passion with his love for nature. By 2013, his channel had amassed over 800,000 subscribers. It really seemed like Brian had it all: a thriving YouTube career, a loyal community, and a deep and loving family. But in October of 2013, Yoteslaya would upload a Borderlands 2 gameplay clip. But he had no idea it would be his last. Days later, tragedy struck. On October the 23rd, in the early hours of the morning, Brian Rickard was driving with two friends, Ryan Cook and Ashley Pugh, through northeastern Vigo County, Indiana. The roads were dark, the night was quiet, but then everything changed in an instant. At 2 a.m., their pickup truck approached a railroad crossing at Gallagher Road in Rio Grande. A northbound CSX freight train was barreling down the tracks at full speed. Instead of stopping though, the truck attempted to beat the train, but they didn't make it. The impact was absolutely devastating. The train struck the truck at high speed, hurling it north of the crossing. Both Brian and Ashley were ejected from the vehicle and then pinned beneath it. All three of their time on this earth was ended that night. Investigators arrived quickly. They saw that no one in the truck had been wearing a seatbelt, and reports suggested that alcohol may have played a role in the crash. The train's safety gates and signals had been functioning normally, leaving no question that the truck simply didn't stop. For the train crew, there was nothing they could have done. By the time they saw the vehicle approaching, it was already far too late. They did, however, throw the train into emergency braking mode. They braced for impact, but at that speed, their momentum was completely unstoppable. The news shook the gaming community. Fans all over the world woke up to horrific headlines, struggling to process what had just happened. Yoteslaya, one of the biggest names in gaming, was now gone. News spread like wildfire across the internet. Fans, friends and fellow creators were all left stunned, struggling to process how someone so full of life, full of energy and humour could now be gone in an instant. His YouTube comment sections became a memorial. Long-time subscribers flooded in, leaving heartfelt messages, sharing their favourite moments, and expressing just how much he had meant to them. Other content creators also posted their own tributes, some of which garnered millions of views. As more details of the crash emerged, emotions were mixed. There was sadness but also frustration. Reports said that alcohol played a role, so trying to outrun a train was a terrible misjudgment, something that easily could have been avoided, especially if nobody was inebriated. In the wake of his passing, petitions surfaced urging Gearbox Software, the developers of Borderlands 2, to add Yoteslaya into the game as a tribute, and touchingly, this is something that they honoured. So in some small way, along with his YouTube channel that still sits as it was after all these years, Yoteslaya does live on. The early days of YouTube were filled with experimentation, people testing the limits of what an online audience would watch, what they would laugh at, and what they would connect with. And among these outliers was a woman who quickly stood out, not just for her wit, but for her raw honesty and fearless storytelling. Emily Hart was never just another YouTuber. Her videos weren't about gaming, makeup tutorials, or reaction clips. Instead, she carved out a unique space with her 10 Reasons Why series, which tackled everything from modern dating, relationships and gender roles, to mental health and fertility. She had a sharp sense of humour, delivering social commentary with just the right mix of sarcasm and self-deprecation. By the mid-2010s, Emily had become a trailblazer in digital media. On her channel, Emily Hart, her videos were smart, fast-paced and engaging, racking up millions of views per month. She wasn't afraid to get personal, talking openly about freezing her eggs, struggling with anxiety, and even discussing her antidepressants in ways that few other content creators were doing at the time. Her channel grew really fast. It seemed her audience related to her blunt honesty and, more importantly, they saw themselves in her. Whether she was talking about turning 30, the awkward realities of dating, or why social media was making everyone miserable, she had a way of making even the most uncomfortable topics feel hilarious. And soon, her work wasn't just confined to YouTube. Emily transitioned into television presenting, landing roles on Channel 4 as well as other networks in the UK. She interviewed Hollywood stars like Eddie Redmayne and Hugh Jackman, further cementing herself as a respected voice in entertainment. But while her career was thriving, her personal life was shifting. By 2018, Emily had been diagnosed with low fertility, which led her to begin IVF treatment to freeze her eggs. It was a difficult emotional journey, one she documented openly for her audience. It was around this time that she also met Jake Hazel. He was a fitness instructor and mental health advocate, someone who had also battled his own struggles with addiction and depression. Together, they became a support network for each other. They publicly spoke about mental health, fitness, and resilience. They were in love, and they were planning for the future. But that future would be cut short in a way that no one could have ever predicted. By the summer of 2019, Emily Hart was now in her loving relationship, and they were actively working towards starting a family and continuing to build on the success that she had created for herself already. Her audience had followed every step of her journey. But on July the 11th, 2019, Emily uploaded what would become her final video. It was titled 10 Reasons to Get a Younger Boyfriend, and it was a light-hearted listicle, one that was inspired by her relationship with Jake Hazel, who was in fact 8 years younger than her. In it, she joked about his youthful energy, his ability to help with tech problems, and the benefits of dating someone who hadn't yet developed bad habits from past relationships. But hidden within the video was a seemingly insignificant detail, one that would later become haunting. Emily showed off 2 scooters that Jake had bought for her as a birthday present. One of them was electric. The very next morning, on July the 12th, Emily left her home in Battersea, London, riding that same e-scooter. She was headed to her appointment at a fertility clinic. This was a trip she had likely made many times before. The roads weren't particularly busy that morning, but the Queen's Circus roundabout was known to be tricky for cyclists and smaller vehicles. And at 8:30 a.m., as she navigated the intersection, everything went horribly wrong. Witnesses saw Emily collide with a lorry at the roundabout. The impact was instantaneous and catastrophic. Emergency services were called, but there was nothing they could do. Emily Hart passed at the scene. She was just 35 years old. News of her death spread quickly, and by that afternoon, her Instagram account had posted a message confirming what many fans couldn't believe. It read, "Emily was involved in an accident yesterday and passed away. We all loved her to bits, and she will never be forgotten. She has touched so many lives, and it's hard to imagine things without her. She was a very special person." This was in fact the first recorded e-scooter fatality in the UK, and it sent shockwaves through both her audience and the wider social media community. Fans, fellow creators and celebrities flooded social media with their tributes. UK TV presenter Davina McCall wrote, "My heart goes out to Emily's family and friends. Such a shock. Sending you love and prayers." Comedian London Hughes, who had been friends with Emily, tweeted simply, "My friend is dead, and now I feel completely sick. Rest in peace, Emily." For a creator who had documented nearly every aspect of her life online, the suddenness of her passing felt almost unreal. And as people grieved, one question remained unanswered. How could this have happened? In the wake of the accident, authorities launched an investigation into exactly what went wrong that morning. While e-scooters were growing in popularity across Europe and the US, they were still actually illegal to ride on public roads in the UK. This meant that there were no specific safety regulations, and that riders were left navigating dangerous intersections with nothing more than instinct and sometimes just sheer luck. The Queen Circus roundabout where Emily's accident occurred had already been criticised for its confusing layout. Only a year prior, a cyclist had passed there after being hit by a bin lorry. But when the inquest findings were finally released over a year later, in September of 2020, they revealed something that was equally as disturbing. Emily's crash hadn't just been a freak accident. There were actually specific failures that contributed to her losing control. According to Westminster Coroner's Court, her final crash was caused by number 1, the e-scooter being driven too fast, number 2, an underinflated tyre, and number 3, a sudden loss of control after hitting an inspection hatch. These findings offered no comfort. Emily hadn't been reckless. She had just been unaware that a minor mechanical issue, something as simple as an underinflated tyre, would in fact seal her fate. Boyfriend Jake Hazel, who had bought her the scooter as a birthday present, was left haunted by regret. "I wish I'd never got her that scooter," he admitted in an interview months later. The tragedy reignited debates about e-scooter safety in the UK, and while Emily's demise was the first recorded fatality, it certainly wouldn't be the last. Lawmakers faced immense pressure to decide whether these vehicles should be legalised and regulated or just banned entirely. Meanwhile, Emily's YouTube channel became frozen in time, a digital memorial filled with laughter, wit, and an unapologetic zest for life. Even though she is gone, her videos do continue to inspire thousands. There is, of course, a cruel irony in the fact that she was travelling in the hopes of bringing a new life into the world, but instead it saw hers snuffed out. She had always encouraged people to embrace life fearlessly, and in the end, that's exactly what she did. Morin Kelly, better known as Anu to her friends, was a creative, free-spirited young woman. She grew up in Vancouver, Washington, and was raised by her single mother, Mapuana. From a young age, she was drawn to music and self-expression, often posting YouTube videos of herself playing ukulele, singing, and making silly skits. Her channel, still online today, is a glimpse into who she was. A kind of goofy but thoughtful and deeply introspective young woman. And she was definitely someone who wanted to find meaning in the world. Morin was definitely not just a quirky musician. She was someone who sought deeper understanding in life itself. Her bio on YouTube reads, "Most call me Anu. I feel the unseen, hear the vibrations. I see the beauty, spread the love with creation. My goal is to surrender to the universe, becoming one with all, a loving world, the problem solved. I love you." So yeah, even at that young age, she was pretty deep. She talked about spiritual journeys, about pushing herself beyond her limits, and about the idea that nature can bring clarity and enlightenment. So, during a camping trip, when she told her friends that she was going on a spiritual quest on the evening of June 9th, 2013, you can imagine this wasn't completely out of character. But what set this moment apart was what she did next. She took off her clothes. All she was wearing was a fanny pack, and that contained a sharp implement, matches, and a compass. I feel like I just need to share this because I don't think it's really known in America. We call fanny packs bum bags. So, yeah. Then, barefoot and unclothed, she walked into the dense forests of the Gifford-Pinchot National Park, disappearing into the trees. And as she was going, she said she would be back by midnight. Her friends didn't panic, at least not yet. She had done things like this before, pushed herself, tested her limits. They assumed that she'd be back by midnight, cold but triumphant, maybe laughing about her wild experiences while she was gone. However, midnight came and went. Morin Kelly never returned. And just like that, a vibrant young woman, someone who had filled the internet with music and laughter, had now vanished into the wilderness without a trace. When she first left, the sun was still up. The day had been warm with temperatures in the mid-70s, but as the night drew in, the temperatures dropped to the 40s, which is about the temperature in a fridge. With no clothing, this was definitely cold enough to fall into trouble quickly. Maybe she'd gotten lost. Maybe she had misjudged how far she'd gone. Whatever happened though, as hours passed with no sign of her, the reality really set in. At 12:15 a.m. on June the 10th, Maureen's friends called the Skamania County Sheriff's Office. A search team was sent out the next morning, but they had no idea where to really begin. Authorities believed that she had crossed Canyon Creek, heading north into the wilderness, climbing steep terrain towards Forest Service Road 54. But from there, any sign of a trail disappeared. They found bare footprints near the creek, and they were the same size as Maureen's feet. But those tracks vanished abruptly. There was no scent, no clothing, and definitely no body. So the search intensified. Helicopters, tracking dogs, ground teams, they all scoured the dense, unforgiving forest. But every attempt led to the same answer: nothing. Where had Maureen gone? The steep terrain, thick underbrush and rugged cliffs made searching nearly impossible. Someone could have walked right past the body hidden under logs or branches and never even noticed. For 2 days, teams scoured a 4-mile square area, but they found nothing. On June the 12th, the official search was suspended. Without clothing, food or shelter, Maureen's survivability window was very small. It was in fact cold enough for hypothermia to set in fast. Officials believed that one of two things had happened. She got lost, succumbed to the elements, and her body was then scavenged by wild animals, or she left and never intended to return. Her family wasn't convinced that she had passed away in that forest. She was smart, resourceful, and incredibly independent. So if she really wanted to disappear, maybe she did. There were no signs of foul play, no torn clothing, no evidence of an attack. However, there is a theory that she made it to a road, possibly the service road, and there she was picked up by someone. As we know, she was completely unclothed, so it only takes a chance encounter for something really bad to happen. Alternatively, she could have hitchhiked to a new life. Another theory suggested that maybe Maureen was struggling mentally and she just chose to leave everything behind. Her YouTube channel, A New, gave a glimpse into her big personality, creativity, and love for life. She's one of those people where it's hard to imagine she could just vanish into nothingness. However, for 10 years, there was absolutely no answer, but there may have been a breakthrough in August of 2023. A hiker trekking through the big lava bed area in Gifford-Pinchot National Forest made a chilling discovery. It was a human skull. Authorities immediately suspected that it was Maureen's. Was this a confirmation that her family had dreaded, or would this just further add to a mystery? The hiker recorded the GPS coordinates and immediately contacted the authorities. When investigators arrived at the site 5 days later, they discovered some additional remains scattered nearby too. Given the location and the circumstances, detectives believed the remains likely belonged to one of two people. There was Christopher Zitzowitz, a 31-year-old Oregon man who had disappeared in that same area, or of course, it could have belonged to Morin Kelly. Both of them have vanished without a trace within the same remote and rugged landscape. The Clark County Medical Examiner's Office took custody of the remains, and they undertook forensic testing to determine who they belonged to. For Maureen's loved ones, this discovery brought a mix of emotions. But incredibly frustratingly, at this time, there is still no definitive answer as to who these remains belong to. Maureen's YouTube channel, though, lives on. It captures the essence of who she was, how she wanted to be seen, and how she wanted the world to be. I wonder what she'd think all these years on.